o'clock is a brand new episode of Red Dwarf. But now, on BBC Two, it's It'll Be Alright in the 90s.
Welcome along once again to It'll Be Alright in the 90s, the podcast you've got to give to your mama, papa and daughter before doing a little dance and drinking a little water. I'm Scar Tish Stew Joslin, and joining me as always is Alex Fleenwood. Do you see what I've done there?
Yeah, very good, very good.
Yeah, you like that?
Mm-hmm, yeah. It's the first time I've ever been called Alex Fleenwood. It may surprise you.
Well, I'm happy to have provided you with a first so early in this recording. This is an episode that I'm very much looking forward to, Alex. I don't know about you. You're probably slightly less enthusiastic about it, but enthusiastic nonetheless.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is very much your beast, but I'm looking forward to it nevertheless.
Yes, listeners, we are finally coming round to recording our much vaunted, our much awaited episode on the Red Hot Chili Peppers in the 90s. This one's definitely for me. But before we get on to that, a word from our sponsors this evening, who are Clarettes. Drinking, smoking and eating rich food can make your breath pong. So always carry Clarettes breath fresheners with Actisol to help neutralise those nasty niffs. Just use the code ALRIGHT90s at participating retailers for 20 pence off the single packet price. Clarettes, the breath freshener with Actisol.
Lovely, lovely stuff. I seem to remember, was it Hale and Pace who did the adverts for them for a long time?
It was Hale and Pace doing the adverts, and in the adverts they do say exactly these words: drinking, smoking and eating rich food can make your breath pong. How advertising has changed in 30, 35 years.
Yeah, absolutely. What constitutes rich food as well? I didn't know that could affect your breath.
Yeah, I'm not sure, like sort of rich meats and cheeses, I would imagine, things like that. Things that you sort of have on the side on a Christmas night, I always think of as being rich food.
Yeah.
Cheese, crackers, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, goodness knows, the breaths must have really ponged in medieval times if that was the cause of such issues.
Well, I mean, you know how my addiction to Cheez-Its is going, so it's a particular problem around here. I also understand that this offer is going down very, very well with the various patrons of the lodge.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, lots and lots of rich food going on down there every evening.
I would imagine so. Their in-house catering is really something to be believed, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. It's rare that you see a meal cooked on a spit in this day and age, but they're still using theirs regularly down there.
Over an open fire as well.
Yeah. We actually have an update from the lodge coming up on the bulletin board, but we'll get to that in a bit.
Oh, that's exciting. Well, without further ado then, let's have a look in the postbag and the bulletin board. Alex, what have you got over there?
Well, speaking of the lodge and their cooking techniques, we've actually had an update from the lodge from Dad of the Pod. So he sent in an email and I will read it out now. I said I would tell you about the ladies' exclusion wall. There's just a fragment left now. Time and unruly use have reduced the rest to rubble. There is controversy over whether to knock the fragment down, keep it with an explanatory plaque on it, or just let it be. Alex's mother, Sheila Bowden-Hill, and Dolly Wadden are in favour of demolition, of course. A previous worshipful master, Professor Raybridge, had built it in 1961 after finding out that ladies had to vote. This was a late discovery on his part, but he was a professor of ancient history and didn't take much notice of anything that had happened after the end of the Second Punic War. Now he was alarmed that hordes of emancipated ladies would attempt to storm the bastion of the lodge, so he got the builders in. It was widely believed in those days that ladies couldn't get over anything that was higher than 2 feet. That's about 60 centimetres for you young people. We don't know why they thought that. Maybe something to do with corsets or being unladylike to clamber. Anyway, the prof got them down to build a wall 2 feet 6 inches high, 76 centimetres, and did not put in any sort of gate. It must have worked because no hordes of ladies got in apart from Dolly and later on Sheila and Alex's mother, and now it seems Teresa Stenson. All the wall did was irritate delivery drivers and the more elderly members who had to be carried over it in the ceremonial wicker basket by 4 lodge servants. This basket can still be seen in the lodge museum room, as can the overlarge portrait of Professor Raybridge, resplendent in the bearskin top hat, carrying the wand of office and looking dismayed at the modern world. Wow. Some real history down there. I don't think I've ever actually been in the museum room, but it sounds like there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, no, maybe when we head there for my postponed Vera Ling songbook gig, we'll go in and have a look at the museum room. Shades of, I mean, there's a bit of everything there. There's a bit of Hadrian's Wall. There's a bit of the Berlin Wall. There's all
Yeah,
of it, isn't there? It's all
yeah,
happened at the lodge.
yeah. I mean, I think the most shocking thing about all of that is, of course, that Teresa Stenson has been named.
Mm.
There has been an official recorded sighting of her in the lodge, which asks a few questions, actually.
Yeah, this whole Terence Simpson masquerade can't have lasted very long then.
No, no, no.
Yeah, okay, right. Well, we'll need some further information on that as soon as possible. I would suggest.
Yeah, keep us updated out of the pod.
Give us a sec, listeners, while I just recite Cat of the Pod, who's decided to crash the recording. 1 second. One item on the bulletin board from me this time, and it's another arcane board game, card game from the 90s, which I sometimes like to look at and see if I can resurrect. Are you interested in this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so during the course of my regular eBay foraging, I came across what were described as some Subutio Squads cards. Now, do you remember these at all? Did you ever collect them or play with them?
No, I don't recognize them at all.
Okay, so I had like a couple of packets of these, but I never had enough together to sort of play a full game or do anything with them. I was just collecting them really like you would collect football stickers. So I was interested in this set, and I paid £10 or £11 for them. About 600 cards duly arrived, which I would suggest is more than some. I've actually been able to go through them. I've got the box here. It came in the Subutio Squads Premier League Pro Set Edition there. As you can see,
Nice.
165 unique cards included. This was the last edition of the Squads game. And with the help of a trading card website, I've actually been able to establish that I have a full collection of Squads cards now, plus loads and loads and loads and loads of extras. So I am opening this up to the listeners. If anybody wants me to send them a selection of Subutio Squads cards from sort of 95, 96 from a particular team or just some random ones, let us know a PO box, send us an address, and I will get those in the post to you straight away because wife of the pod, Beth, isn't going to want these hanging around in the house for very long. But one thing that caught my eye, obviously, I did have a look at the rules, and much like the Big Break board game, I don't think we've actually done this on the podcast, but we've definitely tried the Big Break board game, haven't we, together?
Mhm. I think we have,
And
yeah.
that was almost impenetrable in terms of gameplay and rules. The Subutio Squads game is exactly the same, but what caught my eye was this match incident card. So obviously, it's supposed to simulate the idea that random things will happen in football matches which are going to affect the outcome, and you play these cards at random times. There'll be a yellow card, there'll be a red card, the ball will hit the referee, that sort of thing. They have had the foresight to include a streaker card. I don't know if you can see that there.
Oh, yeah.
There's a picture of a well-chiseled male torso there. And the rule on the card is as follows. Place this card on your discard pile after you announce your shot on goal. The opposition goalkeeper has been distracted, and you can reduce his score by 1. Now, as a member of
Nice.
the Goalkeepers Union, is it fair to say that goalkeepers are more distracted by streakers than any other player on the pitch?
No, no, it's not. I suppose if the streaker is behind
Mm.
the striker won't have seen them, whereas the keeper will be sighting them over the striker's shoulder. So maybe that's the reason. But I don't think has there ever been a goal that's been scored because the keeper was distracted by a streaker?
Not that I'm aware of. No, play would be stopped surely the moment the
Yeah.
streaker ran onto the field and the referee realised. So I
I
think
think
this
so.
is just a wrinkle of the game. But that just caught my eye, and I thought it was quite funny, so I thought I'd read it out for you.
Lovely stuff, yeah. I was going to suggest you should open it up to swapsies, but you don't need swaps, do you? Because you've got all of them. It's purely a giving away exercise now.
Yeah, there were 3 different issues of squads cards, and whoever sent them to me from eBay has had the full collection, and they just sent me the entire lot. So I'm going to keep the ones that make up the full collection. They will, of course, only increase in value.
We might be using them as currency if things keep going the way they are.
That's very true. Colin Hendry might increase exponentially in value. You never know due to world events.
Just a couple of quick bits of correspondence from me. The first one is from brother and legend of the pod, Adam, who has commented under one of our previous Instagram posts regarding VHS tapes. And he says, I remember making video projects with friends, filmed on dad's VHS camcorder, and then really rudimentarily edited by hooking up 2 video players to each other. And then I asked for a bit more detail on this because I couldn't quite work out how that worked. And he says, I don't know if I fully remember exactly how it was done. My friend was a more technologically minded one. I just remember it involving trying to time it just right with the pause/record buttons. And if we were lucky, we only had a split second of blank tape or static between scenes. So that's some really early pre-digital
Mm.
video editing there being done there using VHSs, which is very hard to imagine now. He also says, I remember there was always a level of uncertainty with videotapes. If you had a fancy video player, you could schedule something to be recorded without having to be there. But there was always a chance that something would go wrong and you'd miss the start or end of the broadcast. And you never knew when a tape would finally fail and you'd get the tracking lines or the player would chew it up. You were always on borrowed time. I do remember in the Radio Times and other TV Times and whatnot, there would be a little code, wouldn't there, at the end of every listing, which is what you would type into your video player and it would sort of know when to stop and start. Never really understood that in a pre-internet world, but apparently it worked.
Yeah, the old Video Plus numbers. I remember it very well.
Yeah. And then finally he says, I remember when DVDs became popular, probably around the 2000s, I thought VHS tapes were better because you could stop watching and when you came back to it, it'd pick up exactly where you left off. Whereas with the DVD, you'd have to fast forward through to find it, which is true, really. That was the one downside of the DVD, wasn't it? That it wouldn't really remember where you were unless, I think sometimes it did. If you maybe stopped it and then came back to it without doing anything else, it would remember. But VHS, yeah, it would be exactly where you left it. And the next short message I have is from another legend of the pod, Hannah Kelly, and she says, you asked about VHS board games. I have fond memories of playing Atmosphere, that's fear with an F, with my cousin Adam. It's a horror-themed board game with a gatekeeper host appearing on the screen with challenges and clues, and he'd insult you when you got things wrong. It was a race against the clock to beat the gatekeeper, collecting your keys before the 60 minutes was up. I remember it being really immersive and something we played a lot. Do any other listeners remember playing it? Did you ever play Atmosphere, Stu?
No, I can't say I did, I'm afraid, but I have remembered one that I picked up from a car boot sale. Have I spoken about the Trivial Pursuit VHS game before?
No, you haven't, no.
Okay, so it was just the tape that I picked up. There was no
Okay.
there was no instructions or pieces or anything, but I remember watching the tape and then it would play like a clip from the news and then it would say pause it here and then clearly you were then supposed to go and answer a question about the clip or whatever by looking it up in the booklet when it gave you a corresponding number, I don't know. But it was almost uniformly like clips of things that have scarred me for life. Like one of them I remember was the Challenger space shuttle disintegrating after takeoff.
Yes. Yeah.
Another one was the lad falling into the gorilla enclosure in Jersey Zoo.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, as a lad of a similar age, that was the one that probably terrified me the most.
Yeah.
And I think the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan was on there as well.
Wow. Okay. Really, it's just that's pretty unsettling. I mean, the people who sold that at the car boot sale must have been absolutely rubbing their hands in glee to get that off their hands, because presumably it was completely useless as you couldn't do anything if you didn't have the questions or the answers.
Yeah, I remember also it was in one of those like video library cases, you know, the sort of faux leather ones that make them look like a book.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe I bought it for the case and I thought, I know, I'll put own goals and gaffs in there because I didn't have a case either. I just thought I'd have a look at the Trivial Pursuit tape, I don't know. But yeah, I definitely remember the Jersey Zoo clip in particular. And I still don't like that when it comes up now. I still don't like it, even though I know that the point of the clip was that the gorilla actually protected the young lad until someone came to rescue him. And of course, it had a very happy ending. But it came up years later on, it was either the Really Wild Show or the CITV equivalent, and they had the lad who was a bit older, and they interviewed him, and they were playing these clips over and over again, and I had to switch it off. I couldn't handle it.
That must have been the CITV version, because I think the Really Wild Show had an interview with the gorilla, which was much more enlightening.
Yes, I think you must be right. Yes.
And before I move on, I just wanted to wish you a happy faux one day, Stu, for tomorrow as we record this. The 16th of April is faux one day. So remember everyone to change your phone books because there will be an extra digit in your all your phone numbers now.
Yeah, when I call up my parents tomorrow night, I'll make sure to dial 01249 instead of 0249 because I just won't get through otherwise, will I?
Stu, I think you've had something quite exciting in the post bag, haven't you?
I absolutely have, yes. I'm very much looking forward to this. We have had some physical posts through from listener to the pod, Stu Zanoni. Now, you might remember from a previous episode that Stu had left a Spotify comment on one of our episodes that, for some bizarre reason, despite the fact that we run this show, neither of us were able to access. And Stu very, very kindly sent us in an email telling us all about how he found us in the first place, how he really enjoys listening to the podcast, which we're very, very grateful for. He sent us a couple of pictures of his sort of 90s den that he's got with all of his different 90s items and pictures on the wall and things, which looks absolutely brilliant. And he has been kind enough to send us through a 90s care package of items from his own 90s collection. And I haven't opened this box. I'm very, very excited. I'm going to do a live unboxing now. Let's see what Stu sent us. What do you reckon? Should we go for it?
Let's do it. Yeah, live unboxing for only my benefit. Well, visually at least.
I should say I have opened the box just so that we were spared the experience of me trying to get through layers of tape and paper while we were actually on the air. So I have opened the box, but I have not lifted the flaps yet. So
that's because you're a pro.
Absolutely, here it is. I can just show you there. Yeah. That's the box. Okay, so I'm opening it and I'm already excited. The first thing I can see is a parental guidance explicit lyrics sticker.
Oh, this has got to be good.
So this is going to be good. Let's have a look. Blimey, I'm going to have to go through this very quickly. I think he has sent us loads. Oh, Stu, we're very grateful. First of all, we have a book about the history of Pro-Star Corinthian football figures.
Nice.
That's very absolutely nice. Brilliant. I'm going to be flicking through that as soon as we have finished this recording. The explicit lyric sticker belongs to Chef Aid, the South Park album.
Lovely.
Fantastic. All there. A stereophonic experience, it says on the CD itself. That's brilliant. We have various, I've got some trading cards here. There's a shiny Crystal Palace kit sticker. There's a little box here of stickers and trading cards. We have got the Red Dwarf log from 1996 hardback book, which I think you'll enjoy particularly, Alex.
Yeah, definitely.
We have one for me here. We've got the Beano book 1998, which I think I actually had. Christmas 1997. That would be wonderful to look back at that. We've got an issue of Wally's World, part 40. Looks to be a periodical publication there that you collected up, a bit like TechnoQuest that we discussed on a previous episode. More Red Dwarf for you here, Alex. We've got the Red Dwarf Smegazine, Volume 2, issue number 4 of the Smegazine. Here we go. Right, now we're getting into the real gold. What have we here? We've got a Match from January the 10th, 1998. David Beckham on the cover. We've then got David James, January the 17th. And 2 issues of Sported, the short-lived All Sports magazine, which I do remember buying. And I think I might have mentioned on the pod before. So I'm going to look forward to reading that. Johnny Herbert's Guide to F1 Drivers.
Lovely.
In this issue. And then Damon Hill, A New Year, New Team. F1 Ace looks forward to 98 season with Jordan, with a lovely advert for Actua Ice Hockey on the back. Stu, we can't thank you enough. This is absolutely wonderful. Oh, hello, what's this? Oh, wow. Oh, this is my favourite thing of the lot. He sent through the Game Boy cartridge for the Incredible Crash Dummies game.
Oh, wow.
That I mentioned as one of my games from 1992 or 3. I can't remember which year in particular, but that's I'm going to have to fire up the Game Boy. Oh, man.
That's incredible. Yeah.
Well, Stu, thank you so much for this. There's a few other bits and pieces in here. We've got a Feathers McGraw model I can see here. We will go through the whole box. But, Alex, if I told you that Stu had sent us one box, I'd be lying. Because yesterday, we received another box from Stu. Would you like to have a look at that one as well?
This is unbelievable, yeah.
I know. These are the most 90s related gifts I think we've ever received for one recording. So let's have a look in the second box again. I haven't opened it. I've just got it ready to be opened. We have a David Seaman Pro-Star Corinthian model there. Absolutely brilliant. And a Patrick Vieira pencil topper.
Nice.
So there's a couple of Arsenal things in here. Oh, this is lovely. We've got a blank DVD, which is labelled Argos Catalogues. Stu, you know us too well. You know us too well. This is interesting. I've got a little plastic bag here, which is sealed.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder what's in here.
What's going on there?
Yeah, let's have a little look. Oh, Alex. I'm going to be sending this up to you, definitely. This is definitely one for you. Wow. We've only got some Lynx Africa aftershave.
Oh, look at that.
Look at that. Direct from the 90s.
That's probably worth something, you know?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. Sealed as well. Never been opened.
Blimey.
See if let's find some sort of year or date on the bottle in a second. We've also got a Goosebumps book here, Ghost Beach, and a couple more magazines, a couple more Red Dwarfs, and a couple more Match magazines. So clearly couldn't all fit in one box. Stu had to send a second box through. What can we say, Stu? If only all of our listeners were as generous as you. The gauntlet has been handed down to everyone else listening.
That is incredible. Absolutely incredible. I can think of one very lucky boy who's going to be receiving an awful lot of Sabutio squad cards in return very soon.
Stu, as many Sabutio cards as you want, mate, are on their way to you by return of post. Just let me know. I can do you anywhere up to 300. Just say the word, and they'll be yours. What can I say? What a treat! That's absolutely fantastic. I'm going to look forward to looking at some of those magazines and books in more detail.
Amazing, yeah. And we'll get some photos on social media, won't we? Just so people can see exactly what we've received.
We certainly will. I think those Match magazines are going to be ripe as well for some sort of 90s transfer chat and everything else at home with a footballer. You know, what does Mark Fisher's kitchen look like? That sort of thing. So, yeah, we will keep you well informed on that. And Stu, thanks so much again, mate. You're very kind. What I would like to do, actually, in return for Stu, as well as sending him as many squad cards as he likes, is having looked into his background as a non-league footballer, I'd like to make Stu the official non-league footballer of the pod.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I know he's not a 90s non-league footballer, but we're going to have to break the rules slightly in this case because this guy is a goal machine. He's played for many, many teams across many years at all different levels of non-league. And in one of his recent emails to me, he's let me know that he's just exceeded the 400 career goal mark.
Wow.
Which is pretty amazing for a footballer of any standard. So Stu, you are now our official non-league footballer of the pod. Many, many congratulations.
Time now for What's the Most 90s. And previously, Stu, we have done What's the Most 90s pencil case, but this was suggested by brother of the pod, Adam, the other day, and I thought we had done it, but I don't think we have done it before. I'm asking you what the most 90s piece of stationery is, obviously excluding pencil cases, because we've done that.
Of course. I'm going for something that was a staple of my pencil case in the late 90s, probably going into the early 2000s as well. This is an item that emerged around this time and I think is still popular today. I'm going with the gel pen.
Okay,
So
yes.
when these emerged, I used to go to a shop called DAC Stationery or DAC Stationery, however you want to say it, down there in the town centre in Corsham. Are you familiar with it?
I am, yes, yeah.
And then when the gel pen boom arrived in the late 90s, I used to go in there in the school holidays and they had a whole wall of Pentel gel pens specifically of every colour you could think of. It was like a pick and mix and there was obviously buy 5 for however much. And I think my first one was fluorescent pink. And then I remember going on to own a gold one and a fluorescent yellow one as well. And I used to love these things. Anything I could get away with writing in a fluorescent gel pen, I would do. Clearly not schoolwork or homework, but other things. And I remember having a light blue one that I lent to my friend James Topping in year 6 because he didn't have a pen for some reason one day. And he gave it back to me weeks later and it was covered in like ink blobs on the outside of the shaft of the pen and it had been chewed and there was hardly any ink in it and anything else. He was, oh yeah, thanks for lending me that. And brought it back to me in a terrible condition. This, of course, is the same James Topping who stitched me up with Mrs. Johnson in the Cup of Sand, if you remember.
Yes.
You know what? Maybe he wasn't such a great friend after all.
Sounds like he had very little respect for you.
Yeah, the scales are beginning to fall from my eyes a little bit, but I do have a runner-up, which is the humble Staedtler school pencil. Actually got one here on my desk, if you remember these ones, the yellow and black striped school pencil, which I used when I was very young in school. Used to do all my writing with a Staedtler pencil before graduating to pens. But the item I most enjoyed and the item that I most revered in my pencil case in those late 90s years was definitely the Pentel gel pen, and that's why I've chosen it.
Very nice, very classy. Yeah, those Staedtler pencils, obviously the classic one was a red tip, red at the end, which I think is HB. And then there was a black end, which was 2B, I think. But there was also, am I right? I think there was a blue one. But what the hell was that? I'm sure there was a blue tipped one.
It's got to be 4B, isn't it? I'm fairly sure there was a 4B.
Maybe. Actually, you know what? The 2B was the red and black stripes, wasn't it? And then the yellow and black stripes with the black tip. Maybe I'm imagining now. Maybe it's not actually important, and maybe I should stop wasting time on a podcast we've already run a bit over time on.
Well, suffice it to say, if there are any 90s stationery experts out there who can clear that up for us, do let us know.
Well, as you were talking, I did think of another option actually that maybe I should have gone for, which I will talk about in a second. But my choice is Yikes pencils and accessories, something that's been talked about in the pod at least once before. So these were made by Beryl from 1993 to 1996, and they were very brightly coloured items, mainly pencils that had even the wood was colourful. I don't know how they did that exactly, but it had coloured wood, very brightly coloured like paint on the outside, and they also did erasers and pencil sharpeners and pads, I think, all super brightly coloured from America. I think I was given some by Brother of the Pod at some point in my primary school days, and there was definitely a cult following at Regis School for these things. Like people would sharpen them and then save the shavings, like the spiral of the shavings, because they were so colourful and looked so sort of aesthetically pleasing. Apparently, they were endorsed by Nickelodeon at some point, and you can sort of see the aesthetic design similarities between those two things. And basically, yeah, they were just very, very 90s. As I said, they only lasted for 3 or 4 years within the decade. And the whole color thing, fluorescent colors were very 90s. And they were just very cool. And I have seen on eBay that there are some going for sale. There's an unopened multi-pack for £31. There's a very rare fountain pen for £100, or you can get a job lot of 48 old new stock pens for £200.
Oh, wow.
So there's a range of items there to suit all budgets. I'm not sure if I'm going to go for any of them. I might even be able to dig out my old nubs somewhere in my parents' house. But yeah, they're very popular in my school around 1995, 96. So I don't know if anyone else listening ever knew about Yikes or had Yikes, but do let us know. But my second option that I just thought about when you were talking was the big fat biro that had multiple colors on the outside. Obviously, there's the ones red, black, blue, green that are still everywhere. But I'm talking about the really fat ones that had like 9 or 10 colors on them. Maybe that's 80s, maybe that's 90s. I'm not sure. But that was another big one. But I think I have to stick with Yikes.
I think that's a great choice. Did you buy the smelly soaps, the Body Shop smelly soaps that you found last time?
I No, in the end, I thought better of it.
Okay, so there's still some money in the kitty maybe for a full set of new old stock Yikes pens.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm going to think about it actually and have a look and see if I can sniff out a better deal.
Well, I think this is one of these what's the most 90s occasions where I have to hold my hands up and admit defeat. I think the Beryl Yikes range sounds like a quintessentially 90s stationery product. I think lots of people who listen to the podcast will remember these and will identify them with the 90s far more than they do a gel pen, which, as I said, sort of came to being in the 90s but is still carried on. I think we're going to put Beryl Yikes into the ledger.
Let's do it.
Time then, after a supersized postbag bulletin board and What's the Most 90s, to talk about our main topic of this episode, which is the Red Hot Chili Peppers in the 90s. Now, this is something that we've been warming up to for a long time, but I think the timing of this is actually really good for a number of reasons. The first of those being a Netflix documentary, which has recently been released about the band's early years and particularly concerning the life and times of their first guitarist, Nel Slovak. But secondly, Ellis and John, those up-and-coming podcasters who we seem to mention more and more often on this show, have been giving the Chili Peppers a bit of flack on their podcast in recent episodes, and I think it's down to us to redress the balance, Alex.
I think so, yeah. It's been awfully harsh. Some of the things they were saying on there made me start to even question whether the Chili Peppers were a good band or not. But I've shaken that off, and I think we need to redress the balance with a proper deep dive today.
So, if I can, Alex, I'll just give you a little bit of a background because while I know you appreciate the music of the Chili Peppers, I know they're not one of your particular favourite bands like they are for me. So, I'd just like to give you a little bit of a background about how I got into the Chili's and what they particularly mean to me before we get going on the albums, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, for me, it was the By the Way album, really, which signalled the existence of the Chili Peppers to me in about 2002. And I would say actually that's their biggest album in the UK. I don't think they've had a bigger album really than By the Way in the UK. And I think the band themselves acknowledged that for some reason people in the UK really went for that album. So it was By the Way for me when I got into them in a big way. And I sort of came into it from a standing start with my friend Craig McCrell, who I know listens to the pod. We got into them at the same time. And I paid no attention to them really whatsoever beforehand because I was into Stereophonics and then before that Take That, as we all know. So I'd paid really no attention to them whatsoever as a band that I might like until I don't know where I heard the tracks. It must have been, I think I was still watching Top of the Pops on a Friday back then. And I remember watching them perform a song called Universally Speaking off the By the Way album. I remember John Frusciante was wearing a green tie-dye t-shirt. That might be the first time that I heard them and thought, okay, this is a band that I need to look into. It was harder then to track down the back catalogue of a band that you got into. It wasn't a case as it is now of just going onto your favourite music streaming service or YouTube and finding out what their greatest hits are and using that kind of way of getting into things. So I had to go into shops. I had to try and find CDs. I remember finding the Californication album in a covered market in Weston-super-Mare. That's where I got my CD of Californication from. I remember getting the One Hot Minute album, which I know you're going to talk about in a minute. I remember getting that in HMV in Bath, and just tracking down all the albums one by one. Obviously, the earlier ones from the 80s were a bit more obscure, and that was when I first sort of dabbled in online ordering as well. Some of my first online purchases were actually Chili Peppers CDs. So it's had such an impact on my life and how we've gone through and what they've introduced me to. And they've also introduced me to different artists that I don't think I otherwise would have got into because, as I think I mentioned when we spoke about VHS and CD singles on a recent episode, I said that the Phonics had done, I think it was The Old Laughing Lady as one of the B-sides on I Wouldn't Believe Your Radio. And then I went off and looked at Neil Young.
Yeah.
So when I get hold of the Chili Peppers' first album, I look and it's produced by a guy called Andy Gill, who was in a band called Gang of Four that I'd read that the Chili Peppers worshipped. So the next thing I did was I went off and got a Gang of Four CD. And then on the second album, there was a cover by Sly and the Family Stone, a cover of a Sly and the Family Stone song, I should say, called If You Want Me to Stay. So the next thing I do is I go and get some Sly and the Family Stone stuff. And that is how my interest in the Chili Peppers helped me to go off into different musical areas as well, which otherwise I might not have found until much later. So I was very grateful for that as well. They've obviously been active since 1982, so we're over 40 years now of the Chili Peppers, but I think we can agree that the 90s is the classic era, and as such, we're going to look at the 3 studio albums they released during the 90s, aren't we?
We are indeed, yeah, I agree. The golden era for me, certainly.
Well, let's jump straight into it then with Blood Sugar Sex Magic from September the 24th, 1991 was the release date, and this was their 5th album. So a little bit of a potted history. They'd released 4 albums in the 80s. Mother's Milk in 89 was the one where they'd sort of started to get through to a mainstream audience. They'd recorded a cover of Higher Ground by Stevie Wonder, which was the big single from that album. But then they go and record Blood Sugar Sex Magic, which is the second album actually with John Frusciante after Hillel Slovak had passed away, and John Frusciante had come in as an 18-year-old to replace Hillel as the Chili's guitarist. And this is regarded still as the best album they ever made. And I think I would agree with that. I think Blood Sugar is definitely their high watermark. It's the first one produced by Rick Rubin, who they've worked with on a lot of their albums subsequently. Recorded at a studio called The Mansion in Los Angeles, and you can actually see a lot of the recording process for the album in a documentary called Funky Monks, which was released at the time on VHS. It's now available on YouTube, so go and have a look at that if you want to see an hour-long black and white documentary of the recording of Blood Sugar Sex Magic. I actually had this documentary on VHS, and I remember my copy had a sticker on it that said Brit Award nominee 2003. So that has to be one of the last VHSs I ever bought.
Yeah, definitely.
I would suggest 2003.
Yeah, it's surprising.
I might have been one of the only people left who had a VCR at that point.
Yeah.
I don't really think there's any filler on this album, which you might be able to say that about the other 2 albums, which we're going to talk about a bit later on. But if I just reel off some of the titles of the tracks that are on this album: The Power of Equality, Breaking the Girl, Suck My Kiss, Give It Away, Under the Bridge. If you have to ask your favourite Chili's track, I Could Have Lied, or one of your favourite Chili's tracks I think you mentioned. And of course the title track itself, Blood Sugar Sex Magic. I really think that every song on this album is worth its place on the album. There's nothing that is there as a make-weight. There's nothing that was recorded in a rush. It's all worth its place on the album, and I think that's why it's regarded as their best album and one of the best rock albums of the 90s and all time, I think, for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it is. It's an incredible album. And I think in a funny way, it's sort of like a bridge album or a transition album. As you say, their early albums in the 80s were much more funk infused, almost a little bit punky, much more frenetic and frantic, with Hillel as the guitarist. But then with John Frusciante coming in, Mother's Milk being the first album, but I think at that point he was still trying to emulate that sort of frenetic sound and trying to play as much as possible. This is certainly what he said in the documentary, which you referred to, the Netflix documentary, whereas he sort of found his voice a bit more on this album and he is more confident in himself. So this is Frusciante really hitting his stride, combined with the band being a little bit more adventurous. And then Rick Rubin, obviously a legendary producer, coming in, working with him for the first time. they're obviously still really young, so they've got a lot of energy and they've got plenty of ideas still, and it all just comes together, doesn't it? And it makes this iconic album with all those great tracks that you mentioned.
Absolutely. But unfortunately, as we covered in our comeback episode in the last series, it all starts to go drastically wrong for John Frusciante in particular during the tour that accompanies this album. So he becomes very uncomfortable with the fact that the band have broken through to a mainstream audience. There was a quote about how he preferred it when they were playing in smaller venues to smaller audiences, and he eventually quits the band during the tour in May 1992 in Tokyo and lapses into a heroin addiction from which he doesn't emerge for a number of years, and we'll come round to his rejoining the band in the late 90s a bit later on. I wanted to talk for a second about a not so much a hidden track or a lost track, but it's one track that doesn't get spoken about as much as the other tracks on this album because it wasn't on the album itself. It was a B-side, and then it was used as a soundtrack to a movie. Talking about a song called Soul to Squeeze. Have you heard this one?
I will have done, but it's not something that I immediately, can recall to my mind.
Yeah, so it's very melodic. It's not hard rock at all. It maybe didn't fit actually on the album, and maybe that's why they left it off because it didn't fit stylistically with the rest of it. But it was then used on the soundtrack to a movie called Coneheads, which is a terrible Dan Aykroyd movie. I am led to believe. I've never actually seen it. They still play this song live. It's a fan favorite when it's played live in the live set. John isn't in the video because the movie came out a couple of years after the album was made. John had left the band by the time they decided they wanted to put it on the soundtrack, so it's just Anthony, Flea, and Chad in the video. But if you haven't heard Soul to Squeeze, it's certainly one of my favourite tracks from this era of the band, and I would definitely recommend that you give it a listen because it's superb.
Got a bad disease. Off from my brain is where I bleed. Insanity, it seems, it's got me by my soul to squeeze. Well, all the love from me.
So, as Stu said, after the touring cycle for Blood Sugar Sex Magic, John Frusciante leaves the band, becomes embroiled in a heroin addiction, which is particularly ironic considering that Hillel Slovak had succumbed to heroin addiction just a few years before. But they needed a replacement to fill his boots, his very big boots. And they find Dave Navarro, who is just fallen out with Jane's Addiction. I think the band is actually split up at this point. And after battling some drug demons himself, agrees to join the band in, I think this was 94, 93 or 94. And then he records this album with them. It's released on September the 12th, 1995, so 4 years after Blood Sugar Sex Magic. It's also produced by Rick Rubin. And yeah, as I say, Dave Navarro, who's come from this much more sort of down the line rock band in Jane's Addiction. And then he has to sort of try and fit into this very close, certainly between Anthony and Flea, really close partnership, really close writing partnership. And Chad, who's been there since 1988 as well, I think. And straight away, I think there's difficulties in their recording process. They don't really get on. I think Anthony and Dave Navarro clash heads quite a lot. And it's just a difficult recording process. Navarro has said, certainly in subsequent years, he wasn't really interested in the funk stuff. He was much more just a classic rock guitarist, which in hindsight seems odd, really, that they hired him and that he wanted to join, considering how funk infused they were. But nevertheless, he joined. Very much a sort of superstar signing in the world of music, that is, isn't it? When someone from a band as big as Jane's Addiction will join another band that's also really big. You don't get that very often. The only one I can think of really is Matt Skiba joining Blink-182 from Alkaline Trio. But I mean, that's not even really on the same scale. Can you think of any other superstar signings like that?
Maybe Ron Wood joining the Stones from the Faces and where he'd been before that, possibly, if we're going back a few years.
Yeah, that makes sense. So as I say, yeah, the writing process was difficult. They released the album. It's much darker themes. There's a song about the death of Kurt Cobain and another one about the death of River Phoenix, who had died sort of during and just before the recording of the album. But yeah, and then their first live performance was at Woodstock 1994. So this was, I suppose, the forgotten Woodstock. Everyone knows 69, everyone knows 99. But there was another Woodstock in 94, which I don't really know much about, other than it was incredibly muddy, because there's, I think, a famous bit of footage of one band playing covered in mud. I can't actually remember who the band is, but the Chili Peppers were there and they played with Dave. This was the first performance with him. I think they've all got massive light bulbs
I
on
was
their
going to
heads.
say,
Is that
is
right?
this a light bulb one? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a light bulb one, I think. So I mean, a hell of an introduction for Dave there to come in, play with this big band at a huge festival, and he's dressed as a giant light bulb. Basically, it looks really unwieldy. If you look at footage of them playing, it looks pretty wild. They, during the touring cycle for this in 1997, which actually turned out to be the final show they played with Navarro, they played the Fuji Rock Festival. This was July 1997. And I found this on Wikipedia. It says a large typhoon had been forecast to hit the festival several hours before the show. The concert took place anyway, and when the Chili Peppers got on stage to play, the audience was being soaked in torrential rains, and the band found it virtually impossible to play their instruments. After 8 songs, the lighting and sound equipment was torn from the stage, and the band was obliged to an impromptu finish. And you can see it on YouTube. It is quite spectacular just how wet and how soaked all of the band members are. I don't know how really they're playing with that amount of water being thrown in their face. You can't actually see anything being torn off the stage, but you can see that it's really windy, and it is quite striking. And it actually ends, if you look closely, with Navarro. He sort of snaps all the strings on his guitar with his hand, which looks quite painful. He just pulls them off.
All right.
Which is sort of a slight variation on the usual smashing of the guitar. After this tour, it basically there was a bit of talk of starting writing for a new album, but it just wasn't really happening. I think Anthony and Dave just weren't going to make up. It was clearly not working, and both of them had relapsed. Anthony was back struggling with heroin addiction, as was Dave, so there was still a lot of drugs going on. And yeah, like I said, they started writing again in 1998, but it just wasn't working. So Anthony Kiedis and Flea decided to let Navarro go, and he was initially very annoyed, but I think he accepted that it was never going to work, and so he left, and it was a sort of a bit of a disappointing end to what could have been a really interesting project, I suppose. Those two big names, but I think looking back, I don't know what you think about the album, Stu, but there's not really much on here that stands out to me. There's one single that is relatively big, which is Aeroplane. I quite like that.
I like pleasure spiked with pain, and music is my aeroplane. It's my aeroplane. Songbird sweet and sour Jane, and music is my aeroplane. It's my aeroplane. Pleasure spiked with pain. That mother always spiked with pain.
I struggle, I think, with everything else. Tearjerker's quite good, the one about Kurt Cobain, but it is much more straight down the line rock, which I don't think suits Flea. It doesn't suit Anthony that well. It's not really what the Chili Peppers are all about. And yeah, I just think it's a bit of a lackluster album. To be honest, I got a bit bored listening to it again in preparation for this episode. So what about you? What do you think about it?
There's definitely a shift towards a darker lyrical tone, as you touched on. Anthony, after being sober for more than 5 years, relapsed while the album was being made, and this led to much darker lyrics than had been on the previous album. It is my least favourite of the three albums from the 90s, but I know it is still fondly looked at by sort of Chili Peppers hardcore fans as being still a productive era for the band, because they did produce this album, which, and I didn't know this until doing my research for this episode, is the highest charting UK album that the Chili Peppers have ever had, is One Hot Minute.
Really? Well,
Yeah.
even ahead of By the Way?
Indeed.
That's so surprising.
My particular personal memory of this album is having a tape of it on a coach to a school trip. I think it was possibly going into the summer holidays at the end of year 9. And I sat next to a kid called Alex Cumming who didn't get it at all. That's my memory of it. Although I think what we suffered from was having a stereo mix in 2 different headphones, so he wasn't getting everything that I could hear, and I wasn't getting everything what he could hear. So maybe that played into it a little bit. There's another interesting angle on this, which is that John Frusciante claims never to have listened to this album, and he's never played any of the songs from this album live with the band. He's quoted as saying he's never listened to it because it would be like seeing your girlfriend with another guy. Now, they did play some songs from the album when Josh Klinghoffer was the guitarist during the 2010s. So he convinced the band to... They certainly played Aeroplane. I'm not sure if they played any other songs from that album, but Josh Klinghoffer was more disposed to play songs from the One Hot Minute album than John Frusciante was. So they did get some live airings later on.
I think that's fair enough. I think it's a bit mean on Dave having written and recorded this album to pretend that it never happened, you know. I know they didn't get on and they didn't see eye to eye, but I think, they should play them every now and again, especially if it's a popular album. You know, the fans like some of those songs. So well done to Josh for pushing for that.
Yeah, I do like, there's a song called My Friends on this album, which was one of the singles that I do like that song as well, to be fair. You mentioned the Fuji Rock Festival, but there's a lot that goes on this One Hot Minute tour. It appears to be somewhat cursed, it has to say. So the US portion of the tour was postponed because Chad Smith broke his wrist. A few shows into the US leg, Anthony Kiedis injured his leg badly while engaging in what he calls eyes closed robotic dancing. He tripped over a monitor and fell off the stage, ending up hanging by his calf from his microphone cable, resulting in a cast which he wore for the next 2 months. Then Kiedis suffers an additional back injury in Prague after falling off the stage while attempting to execute a backflip, forcing him to wear a back brace for the next few shows. They were then asked to play in a North Pole for roughly 100 contest winners. While the show was mildly motivating to the band, they returned home after 2 days. So there's strange things happening in this tour, with people getting injured and weird gigs, and gigs getting called off in extreme weather conditions and going to the North Pole. It just seems like a very, very strange period in the band's history. But like I say, it's still fondly looked upon by Chili Peppers completists.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was quite well received. I looked at the reviews. And it got 4 stars in Q. That's out of 5, obviously. 6 out of 10 in NME. So that's not great. 3.5 stars in Rolling Stone. So it's not. I suppose it was sort of okay, but not amazing. But like you say, I think a lot of Chili Peppers fans do see it as an underrated gem of some sort. And I think you chose it for one of your underrated albums when we did that, or forgotten albums, whatever that episode was.
I certainly did. Yes, absolutely. So once again, we're covering old ground on It'll Be Alright in the 90s. But that's just what we like to do.
That's what a nostalgia podcast should be doing, I suppose. We're nostalgic about our own episodes.
How long ago did we say the podcast was eating itself?
Quite a long time ago, yeah. Oh, just one quick shout out before we move on to the next album. This is, of course, the era where Chili Peppers gave us their best song, which is Love Roller Coaster, on the soundtrack to the Beavis and Butthead Do America movie. So Dave will never be forgotten for helping to produce that.
Oh, let's play a bit in here just for you. Moving on then to the final Chili Peppers album of the 90s from June the 8th, 1999. It is, of course, Californication. John Frusciante comes back to join the band after Dave Navarro leaves. I think, having read everything that I have read and knowing everything I do know about this period in the band's history, the only way the Chili Peppers were going to continue was if John Frusciante came back to join the band. I don't think there can be any doubt about that. So he's gone through his troubles, he's come out of the other side. Flea goes to visit him and asks him to join the band, and there's a very emotional reunion because John Frusciante really, really wants to rejoin the band at that moment in his personal history. And it's obviously great for us because it leads to another brilliant album in Californication. I think what we're discovering here is that we have 3 albums that are really very, very different from each other, despite the fact that they're by the same act in the same decade. You have Blood Sugar Sex Magic, which is still in the sort of funk, punk, even a little bit of metal era of the band. One Hot Minute, as you said, due to the circumstances they found themselves in with Dave Navarro, is more straight ahead rock. And then I think with Californication, it becomes softer, more melodic. The lyrics become more spiritual again after they've been so dark for One Hot Minute. It's so different from the previous 2 albums, and we're seeing a complete sort of sea change in style every time that they release an album in the decade.
Absolutely, yeah. This is the culmination of the 90s trilogy, and as you say, yeah, despite all being produced by Rick Rubin, they've all got such distinct sounds, and yeah, I think this is my favorite of the 90s and therefore of all their albums. But we'll get into it, I suppose.
I definitely think it's Anthony's best vocals out of the three albums. He's definitely in his best voice on the Californication album, if you ask me. So one of the reasons I look on this album so favourably is, I've already said I got into the band with the By the Way album, but then when looking to try and fill in the gaps and get some more Chili Peppers content into my life, I found a Chili Peppers DVD called Off the Map in our local branch of Woolworths in Chippenham. I remember it well. It was £20, which I withdrew out of my own bank account at the time, which would have been a significant chunk of what was in that bank account in order to get this DVD. It is one of the worst put together music DVDs of all time. So it's supposed to present a full show from the Californication tour and the American Californication tour. But all of the songs clearly come from different dates on the tour, different performances, sometimes even in the same song. Like the colour of Chad's boiler suit changes, or Anthony's Mohican is flopping over one way and then it's flopping over another. They're all clearly from different performances, and me and my friend Craig used to laugh so much at this DVD, but we played it over and over again. I played guitar along to it as well, so much, trying to learn a bit more guitar and learn what John Frusciante was doing. And this comes from the Californication era of the band, so that's why I cherish this as well. The Off the Map DVD. Again, it's all available on YouTube, so if you'd like to have a look at the terrible production values for yourself, you can go and do that. One other thing I discovered, again, looking at the associated tour for this album, we'll get into the songs in a minute, but there's a lot of interesting things around and about here. The European tour for this album, in November 1999, the Chili Peppers were supported on a handful of European dates by Performance and Cocktails era Stereophonics.
Wow, that is your dream gig. I'm guessing if you could go back in time and see any gig, it would be one of those shows.
Both bands, I would say, at the peak of their live powers at this point in time. And at the Phonics riding high on the release of Performance and Cocktails, Chili's off the back of Californication. Unfortunately, none of these dates were in the UK. They were all in Europe. I think there were a couple in France, a couple in Germany. But how mind-blowing it would have been to have been at one of those gigs, to see 2 of my favourite bands, one supporting the other. I mean, absolutely superb. It's the thing that dreams are made of.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I love this album. This was the only Chili Peppers album I ever actually owned because it came out sort of bang on the right time for me, and I really liked it. It was Californication, a single that was getting played a lot on Radio 1. That was my first introduction to the band, so it would have been the single actually came out in 2000, didn't it? Because we had this whole Californication gate issue in the past.
That was the first time I got sacked, I think, wasn't it?
I think it was, yeah. But that would have been where I first heard about them. So yeah, early 2000s, and I love that song. And then my brother got the album, and I listened to it a lot. I do think it's a very top-heavy album, if you know what I mean. Like the first half is great, And then there's not really much after that I'm that bothered about until you get to Road Trippin', which is right at the end.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the most top-loaded albums that I can think of. But that front half is just so great. We're going to talk about our favorite songs in a second, but yeah, I really like this album, and I think I struggled with other later albums because this felt like such a perfect bookend to their story. Like if you go back right to the start, the Hillel Slovak days in the mid 80s, it all sort of leads to this. And Chili Peppers, as you said at the start, they're not one of my favorite bands, but I think aside from the Beatles, this is probably my favorite band story. The Chili Peppers, there's something about it that just really captivates me, and I think it's such a perfect narrative. Obviously, people went through horrible things, and Hillel, didn't survive the 80s, so there was some real low points, but it's just a great story, full of those downs and the ups, and all the different guitarists who came along and other band members. And I think it just culminates in this great album, and it sounds like an album written by a band who have come out of a really difficult period and a lot of lows. And we're going to talk about a song and a video in a minute, or I am, which sort of typifies all that. But I mean, I've said it so many times on this pod, that narrative arc that I really like about starting on a high, the crazy early days, then you have the dip, you have all the sadness, the heartbreak, all the difficulties, and then you come out of that with some sort of triumph or some positivity, and that is Californication for me, and that's why I really like this album. It's my favorite album of the band. So yeah, I think it's a perfect way to end the decade.
You summed it up so well. If you want a top-loaded album, by the way, listen to These Days by Bon Jovi. The first 5 tracks are the 5 singles, and then after that, there's nothing on that album. Nothing.
Wow, 5 singles. That's brave sequencing there, isn't it?
Well, this was how it used to be, but I mean, if we're talking about it in the context of Californication, I mean, yeah, in the first 6 tracks, you've got Around the World, Scar Tissue, Otherside, and Californication. Road Trippin', I think, was released in Europe as a single. That's right at the end, as you say. A quick word on Woodstock 99. We've already mentioned it very briefly alongside Woodstock 94. Much like the Jersey Zoo gorilla clip from earlier on, that is not a documentary I've been able to bring myself to watch since it was released. I know that you've seen it, and hopefully it doesn't paint the Chili Peppers in such a bad light. I know there was a particular problem with a song that they played while there was something going on at the festival during their set, but that had already been pre-agreed, and I'm not entirely sure that they were quite aware of what was going on.
No, I don't think it reflects badly on them at all. I don't think they're in the documentary that much.
Okay.
But I don't think any of the stuff that went on at Woodstock was really any of the band's fault, as much as Limp Bizkit were painted as the villains by the organisers of the festival. But I think all the bands were just playing their normal sets, which didn't normally result in a riot. So I did really enjoy the documentary, but I can understand why you might not want to watch it. But I should say that the Netflix film, I think it's called Our Brother Hillel, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, is really good, and I definitely recommend people watching that.
It's a great documentary, even if you're not into the Chili Peppers per se. It's a documentary with a great narrative arc from the band's beginnings until the point where Hillel sadly passes away, and we do encourage you to catch up with it if you can. Well, now that we've discussed all the albums, should we talk about our top 3 Chili Pepper songs of the 90s?
Let's do it. I do love a top 3.
Okay, well, what's your number 3 then, first of all?
Well, my top 2 are pretty much set in stone. I'm slightly struggling to narrow down my third one. I think I'm going to give an honourable mention to Love Roller Coaster because, and I think it's between 2 others off Californication. It's between Otherside and Californication. I think my head says say Otherside because it's a bit more interesting, but my heart is saying Californication. I know it is so overplayed and it was played so much at the time, but it is just great songwriting. I think it's really restrained playing by John and Flea, I think, especially for the Chili Peppers. Anthony's at his best, I think. And Chad, I think Chad is a bit like Ringo Starr in that he does what he needs to do brilliantly. He's not a showy drummer. He's not, Danny Carey from Tool or anything like that, but he does exactly what he needs to do. And this song is like perfect encapsulation of all the band members just doing exactly what they need to do. And it's a great song. So I think that'd be my third choice, Californication. Sorry, just to clarify, I know it didn't come out in '99 as a single, but the song, it's on the album from '99, so I'm allowed it.
I think we can definitely classify this as a 1999 release for the purposes of this exercise.
I just won't talk about the video.
Well, in at number 3, I found it very difficult to choose between Aeroplane and Soul to Squeeze, but I've gone for Soul to Squeeze for the reasons that I've really spoken about beforehand when we were discussing Blood Sugar a little bit earlier on. It's a song that was left off the album because it didn't quite fit for whatever reason, but it's a lovely song. It's still a live favourite, really, really melodic. And the more I think about it, the more it was a shape of things to come moment for when Californication came along right at the end of the decade. So that's why I've got Soul to Squeeze in at number 3.
My number 2 is something you mentioned earlier. It's I Could Have Lied. I think I talked about it on one of our previous episodes. It's a great song. Apparently, it's written about Anthony's brief, attempted relationship with Sinead O'Connor. I don't think she's ever confirmed anything much happened. It was all very much one-sided, unrequited love, I suppose. One of the best solos ever. It's got to be. Well, there's actually 2 great solos in this song, but the main one is. I'm not a big solo guy at all. I'm not generally that interested in them, but this is someone putting human emotion into music form, just directly onto the fretboard. He has an incredible aptitude for this. I think John Frusciante, and I urge everyone to go and listen to it because it's note perfect right up until the very last note fades out. It's just brilliant. So that's the main reason I've chosen it.
I love that, and I've got a lot of respect for you for choosing a non-single as well in your top 3, which is brilliant. I've got a non-single coming up, but in at number 2, I've gone for Scar Tissue, which I think is my favourite song from Californication. It was the first time they'd actually performed in the Top of the Pop studio. They performed Scar Tissue in 1999 when it was released as a single in the UK. It's got that great video where they're sort of battered and bruised and they're driving this convertible down the freeway, and Frusciante's playing a sort of broken guitar doing the solos and just lets it fall out of the car at the end. That's one of the first videos I can remember seeing of the Chili's before I really got into them. I remember seeing it on satellite TV at my uncle's house. We didn't have satellite, but they did. And I remember flicking through the music channels and seeing the video for Scar Tissue. So that's always been a very special song to me, and that's why I've gone in with it at number 2.
Well, that's good because that's my number 1. I think you've covered it pretty well there. It's a combination of the song being amazing, but also the video, which I actually think is one of the best examples of a video matching a song, which then also matches the feel of the whole album. Because, as you say, they're all depicted as being sort of battered and bruised. They're driving at sunset. John's playing a broken guitar. It is all about them having come through this really difficult few years in the 90s when John and Anthony all struggled really heavily with heroin addiction, and they come out the other side, and this sort of really melancholy, beautiful song is what resulted, and I think the video just matches it perfectly, and it's my favorite Chili Peppers song and video combined, so it had to be my number 1.
Have been one of the world's best for ages, but unbelievably, they've never been on Top of the Pops before until now. It's the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Got tissue that I wish you saw. Sarcasm is to know it all. Close your eyes and I'll kiss you, 'cause with the birds of shade, with the birds of shade, it's so lonely you. And with the birds of shade, it's so lonely you. And push me up against the wall. Young tough girl in a push-up bra, falling all over myself to lift your heart and chase your hill, 'cause with the birds of shade, it's so lonely you. And with the birds of shade, it's so lonely you. And with the birds of shade, it's so lonely you.
Absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Well worthy of the number 1 spot. I have gone for my number one. And this is one of these things where it's going to change all the time, I guess, because I'm such a fan of the band. There's going to be periods where I like songs more than others and things like that. It's always going to be changing just because it means so much to me. But my top Chili Peppers song from the 90s of the moment is the opening track of Blood Sugar Sex Magic, which is called The Power of Equality. I just think it's so powerful. I think it's a social commentary on the time. It's one of the strongest songs on the album, despite the fact that it wasn't a single. They end their famous 2003 Slane Castle set with The Power of Equality as one of the best songs on that live set as well. I've always loved this. Like I say, despite the fact it's not one of their best known songs, despite the fact it was never a single, I think that this song is the Chili Peppers at their absolute best. And if you've never heard it, again, like Soul to Squeeze, like everything else we've mentioned, if you haven't heard it, go and give it a listen. I promise you'll love it.
Peace, this is my hour. Can I get just a little bit of power? Hell, now, yeah, what it ought to be. They fill me up like a hollow tree. The power of equality.
Well, there we are then. Another whistle-stop tour of the 90s complete. This time it was the Red Hot Chili Peppers in the 90s. We really hope you enjoyed our look back at those albums and singles with us. I think I'm going to have to go for a complete re-listen straight away. I don't know about you, Alex. Maybe leaving out one hot minute for you.
Yeah, well, I have really enjoyed going back and listening to the albums again in preparation for this episode, and I'm going to continue to do so. I'm deep in a Chili Peppers moment, that's for sure.
If you have anything you'd like to contribute about the Red Hot Chili Peppers, if you'd like to write in about anything we've mentioned on this episode or anything we've mentioned in previous episodes, if you have a shoebox full of 90s goodies you'd like to send to us, Alex, how can the listeners get in touch?
Or if you've ever been a guitarist in the Chili Peppers, because there's a few of you out there, I know that.
Jesse Tobias, Eric Marshall, get in touch.
You can find our link tree in the episode description below, and that will give you a link to all of the relevant places you can get in touch. So please do that. Let us know your top 3 Chili Pepper songs.
Please do. We would love to hear from you on this subject, and we will read out all the correspondence on the next episode. Now, Alex, normally at this point we say something like, oh, well, we're not too sure what we're doing next week, but we'll let you know as soon as we do. I know what we're doing next week. I'm going to tell you now what we're doing next week. We'll see how you react to this, okay? This is Gonzo podcasting. This is the way it's going to be from now on. I think for our next episode, we should do a watch-along of episode 1 of Driving School.
Okay, let's do it. It's a natural progression, isn't it, from the Chili Peppers?
Well, we were just talking about that video where they were driving the open top along the highway, weren't we? So
yeah.
It's as clean a link as you're ever going to get. All episodes of Driving School currently on BBC iPlayer, and I think they're on YouTube as well. So if you would like to get ahead and have a look at the first episode, please do so. But we are going to be watching along on the next episode, so we hope you can join us for that. There's going to be plenty of Maureen Rees content, we can guarantee you. Until then, get your old plates ready. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time. I'm just off to go and read, 5 or 6 issues of Match, a few issues of Sported, and sort through some Subbuteo Squads cards.
It's goodbye from me. I'm just off to continue my quest to learn the solo from I Could Have Lied.
Love the chilies.
Goodbye. Oh, I've just remembered it was 9 Inch Nails that were really muddy at Woodstock 94.
Okay.
Oh well.